with partners and creating an ecosystem in Bangladesh who has the same goal. Business and especially also non-business entities, because only together we can really change labor markets. In the inclusion of persons with disabilities, you showcase that you are a more agile, more flexible, more adaptable organization. We attended one of our global conferences in Geneva where I work, and he came back to Bangladesh saying, look, we need to set up something similar at national level. And that happened only 9 years ago. And I think when I compare the work of the Bangladesh Business and Disability Network with other networks, and I said we have 40 of them around the world, it's really impressive. It's one impactful national business and disability network, which I think has 8 staff. I'm a bit jealous. We have 2 in Geneva to coordinate a global network. Maybe you send a few on loan as a convent to Geneva. And that's really an expression of the success of the network, of being strategic, working with partners and creating an ecosystem in Bangladesh that really is impactful, that helps companies. We heard from the Meridian how much a network can help individual companies to move the needle on disability inclusion. And I think it's key for a network in Bangladesh or in other countries, as well as what we do at global level, to work with everybody who has the same goal. Business and especially also non-business entities, because only together we can really change labor markets at national level or even the global economy towards a more inclusive and more respectful, more fair system. So congratulations again on all of what you have achieved. And I had a discussion just before the conference started. It's never enough. Because when you work in areas like equality, non-discrimination, inclusion, it's never enough. You feel you're never enough because exclusion is still a reality. Discrimination still happens. So, still, we have to have a lot of conversations. And I think events like today's, they help us to regain some energy, commitment, motivation, new networks, new allies, to go back to our respective workplaces and push the agenda on disability inclusion. And I think there it is key to bring our messages. I think we're preaching here to the converted, and it's important, because what we need to do then, go to the mainstream discussions, you know, where businesses talk about big issues, and just ask the question, and what about persons with disabilities? Because if we don't do it, probably nobody else does it. Right? So bringing the discussion on the inclusion of persons with disabilities to the big policy agenda items, to big discussions that businesses and non-businesses have on the economy, on society is so key.
একমাত্র স্মার্ট সিটি বসুন্ধরা আধুনিকতায় এক ধাপ এগিয়ে।
Now, I started in the International Labour Organization, the ILO, some 12 years ago. And ever since, people ask why should we include people with disabilities in our companies? I'm relieved that the question why is increasingly replaced by the question how, but still, the why sometimes comes up. And I want to take a step back and ask, why do we ask why? What is the underlying assumption of having to come up with a business case for a marginalized group like people with disabilities? We all acknowledge that people with disabilities are disadvantaged in society and labor markets. So why the additional pressure of still justifying why it is important to keep people with disabilities for a group that is already so marginalized? But okay, there we go. We have to still answer the why sometimes. So allow me to try to give an answer which might resonate with some of you and others not. I think from a more, I believe, holistic point of view, we need to talk about people with disabilities specifically. If we don't mention people with disabilities specifically, there's a high risk that they're forgotten, that they're not included. At the same time, from a more holistic point of view, We want to create societies, workplaces, economies that are inclusive, that work for all people, including people with disabilities. So what that means in terms of the business case for disability inclusion, for me it means that if you invest as an employer in the inclusion of persons with disabilities, you showcase that you are a more agile, more flexible, more adaptable organization that also has a higher likelihood to be able to compete in an increasingly competitive labor market. So I want to say there is it's kind of a mutually reinforcing circle. You're either already agile, flexible, adaptive, agile as an employer, so you bring in people with disabilities, or you're maybe starting on the inclusion of persons with disabilities, whatever your motivation might be. It might be tax incentives, it might be because the CEO has a family member with a disability. I don't care about the motivation. But if then a company decides to start the disability inclusion journey, it's not about adding people with disabilities to an existing system that we would typically label as integration. So a person with a disability or any other person needs to adapt to an existing system. That's integration. That's why, for me, the distinction between integration and inclusion is so key. Because inclusion means the system will have to change. The system will have to change, and with the system, meaning companies, workforces have to change, and thereby becoming more flexible, more agile, more competitive. Appreciating different points of view, becoming more innovative, and being more able to address individual needs, be it needs of persons with disabilities or any other employee you have in your workforce.